Hi, today I'm going to talk about creating a character for Crystal Lore RPG, or as I refer to it, CLRPG. It's a fairly basic and straightforward system, similar to the rest of the rules, which you seen described in the previous video. So I'm going to walk through this character sheet and explain how we build up a character. So the character sheet is something that I created for Roll20. It's got a lot of features built in, auto rolls, auto calculating stats and stuff like that. So I'll explain it as we go through. If you want to create a character sheet that's not using auto rolls and such, there's just a few more things that you need to do when you're playing the game manually rather than having to do it automatically. But since this is for the Roll20 campaign, we'll stick to the Roll20 character sheet. So a lot of this is pretty much up to your choice. There are no classes in this campaign, in this rule system. There's no levels either. You can pick whatever skills you want for your character, and depending on the skills that you choose, that will define the kind of character that you become. So if you want to have a fighter style class, you'll pick skills that are dependent on that. But you can also mix that in with other attributes. So for example, you could learn first aid and herbalism and become a healing fighter as well. So maybe like a cleric or something along those lines. That means that you've got the full freedom to choose whatever you want. And as discussed in the previous video, the more you use a skill, the more quickly you'll increase it. So it will often form the way you play. It defines your character. That does mean that things are a little bit harder to sort of define what you want to do or what you want to be, but it means you've got more opportunity for role playing and storytelling, and your character can grow and develop in whatever direction the story takes them. So let's work through the character sheet and I'll explain things as we go. So we'll start with the name, and I'm just going to leave it at demo character, which is what I created for this sheet. Now the races, there are 5 basic races. They're all sort of semi or demi-humans or humans. We've got human, elf, Cian, which are the cat people, Thesok, which are the lizard people, and Canid, which are the dog people. Let's just check human for now. The races, they don't have any stats modifiers. It's just a role-playing thing. Let's pick an age. We'll say 26, just picking at random. And the date of birth we'll just put as, let's say 11th of the 8th. Just for avoiding confusion, I use the standard Australian date format, which I think is the same in Europe, which is putting the day before the month. So in this case, it would be the 11th of August. For the height, we'll say 178 centimeters. We work in metric in this sheet. It doesn't really matter, but it's something that if you're consistent amongst all players, then that means that you're not mixing apples and oranges. So if you prefer to work in Imperial for your campaign and you're using this character sheet for that, then you can put whatever units you want in here. It doesn't affect any dice rolls or anything like that. Although it may actually be an issue with the inventory, which I'm hoping to build in, and I haven't yet, but an automatic tally system for the weights. But that's for the future. So let's say 60 kilos, and we have 3 options for gender. The only reason why we've got this drop-down list as sort of presets is because I've put into the automatic roles pronouns. So demo character rolls his, her, their sword. And that'll appear in the chat window over on the right here. So let's just go with the default female. They're in alphabetical order. Over the left here, this first box, we have our attributes. These are characteristics of the person as they were born. These are not learned things. They are essentially basic attributes. So all skill and attribute stats are on a range of 0 to 10. You don't go outside of that range unless there's modifiers. Typical people, average people, will have stats and skills of between 1, 3, 4. Some of them, will be 5. Experts can be higher than that. But a typical villager will be around the 2 to 4 range. But since we're going to be playing heroes, adventurers, I allow people to choose 2 each of levels 4, 5, and 6. So you'll have 2 level 4 attributes, 2, 5, and 2, 6. So let's say we'll make our mind, we'll make that a 6, we'll make body, we'll make that 5. Now, these should be fairly straightforward to understand what they mean: mind, body, spirit, perception, dexterity, and reflexes. But that will become a bit more obvious when we talk about the skills later, because skills are based on the attribute. So mind is sort of your intelligence, your quick-wittedness, your wisdom. Body is anything that's to do with your physical side, your strength, your constitution, your stamina, how well you can take damage, resist poisons, that sort of thing. Spirit is any quality that is hard to define otherwise, that sort of comes from within. So inspiration, music, artistic, charisma, all the sorts of things that sort of come about as your personality. That's spirit. Let's say we'll make that a 4. Perception, that's your ability to see, detect, hear, perceive things. If you're trying to read writing in the dark with small letters, you'll be using perception, that sort of thing. Let's make that a 5. Dexterity is your nimbleness, your finger work, how adept you are at using your hands and your body. That becomes important later on for skills where you need to manipulate things. Some weapon skills are based on dexterity. We'll give that a 4. And finally, reflexes. Reflexes is how quickly you react to things. It's sort of a response to stimuli, how fast you're able to respond. And it's the basis of many weapon skills as well. So we'll give that one a 6. Now, you may have noticed on the right here, we've had this box. We've got health, luck, and character points. We've had a couple of these boxes automatically filled in. Your health is essentially your hit points, how much damage you can take before you fall unconscious. And I'll talk about the damage rules in a later video. And so that is based on your body skill multiplied by 3. Because I entered 5 over here, I've set this to automatically calculate and fill in your total. So when you're starting a game, you'll have maximum hit points, and we'll say 15 out of 15. This is also going to be linked to your character token, so that you can change this either in your character sheet and it'll then be reflected in your token, or vice versa. Luck, that is something that's a bit different from other systems. This is something that I've invented for this system. It's giving you a chance to pass critical roles that you really need to pass in order to, to save a life, to advance a story, to do something vital. You can call on your luck, and luck is determined by your mind score plus your spirit score. In this case, it's 10. And the way luck works is that if you do a roll, before I tell you if that roll is successful or not, you can decide if you're happy with the result. That way, if you want to get a higher skill, then you can roll additional dice, as many as you have luck. And luck resets at the end of each gaming session. So in the case of this character, they will have 10 luck rolls to use throughout the session. So given that it's a binary dice, that means that on average, their luck of 10 will give them 5 extra points on rolls. So 10 extra dice that they can roll at any time on any skill. Once the luck is exhausted, however, that's it for that session. Character points is experience points, XP, and these are something that I give out throughout the game to reward clever ideas, good role playing, defeating opponents, and they can accumulate over time, and then you spend those character points to increase your skills. Now that's something I'll talk about in a future video as well. At the moment we're just building our character sheet, but for now we'll start this at 0 because we're starting a new campaign. The armor box, this is also something I'll discuss in a later video because it's part of equipment. So equipment is something that needs talking about separately. But when you're wearing armor, in this system, different parts of your body can be hit. And it's going to be either random with each roll, a normal attack, or you can do called shots, and those called shots can have special effects. So when you're wearing armor, you'll be wearing different parts of armor on different parts of your body. There are also different types of armor to protect against different types of damage. There's slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning damage. So you might get slashing being a sword, piercing being a spear or dagger, and bludgeoning being a mace or club. Your stealth skill, if you choose to roll it, or if you choose to have that skill, is modified by your armor. So if you're wearing, say, for example, chainmail or plate mail, you'll get lots of noises as you move around. You get clanking and creaking and squeaking, and that will affect your stealth roll. So there'll be a modifier in here.
There are also minimum requirements of your body score in order to wear certain armours. Heavy armours like plate mail or chain mail may require a minimum body score. So that will all be filled in as you come to purchase and add your equipment. So I will come back to that and discuss that later. Character details is just a little free text area where you can enter whatever you want. You can type about your character, and that can be something you can fill in there just to remind you as you go. It can be for writing in plot points you want to make sure you don't forget, little notes or reminders about things you want to do in the future, current circumstances, your immediate goals, status effects that are on you, just things that you want to remind yourself that you can change as frequently as you like. So one thing I haven't mentioned is in the attributes box over here, you can see there's a column here with a square and a dot in the middle. That is representative of the binary dice that we use, with a single dot representing a 1. If you click on that, it's built in to automatically roll that skill, in this case that attribute, and that'll appear over here on the right hand side. So demo character is where your name is drawn from. So whatever name you had over here will appear in the column over there in the chat. And the result there is 1, which was a terrible roll. Unfortunately, they only got 1 out of 6. If you hover over it, you can see what the actual dice rolling was. Unfortunately, Roll20 doesn't have a system for a value of 0 on a dice. So with some help from members on Roll20, I was able to work out a formula to calculate dice. We essentially roll D2s, so in this case 6D2, and then we subtract 6 from that result. And that ends up with the same correct result it would have been if I was rolling 1s and 0s. That then allows me to be able to calculate if there's a critical success or critical fail. That will appear notified in the right hand side here, with the box being a different color around it, red for critical fail and green for critical success. And that's the case with all the skills and attributes. If you click on them, they'll roll over here and you'll see the skill that was rolled appear there, and then the score. You may have noticed it takes a few seconds for that to come up. I think that's just because I've got so much of this sort of pre-calculated stuff going on in the background there. It takes the sheet a few moments. Okay, so scrolling down a bit further, we get to the weapon table. Now again, this is something I'll need to return to talk about a bit more later when we talk about equipment and about combat. But you fill in your character sheet with whatever weapon that you are carrying. So for example, let's give this hero a longsword, and that is of the type sword. That comes into the roll, which you're able to do as you see on the end here. The equip column is saying whether the item is equipped or not. We've skipped over the type column. That's because you can see that sword is the default, but we've got 7 basic categories of weapon there, and they relate to the skills. Now, there are many more types of weapons that you can use, but they will all fit into one of these categories. So we say sword. We'll say equip. That means that you currently have it on you and you can draw on it during a battle. If it's stowed in your backpack, for example, you have it with you, but you can't get it out in time for battle. You need to stop, take your backpack off, put it down, get the weapon out, and so forth. So if it's equipped, you can use it immediately. If it's not, you can't. The damage is the dice roll that you work out for your damage, and it's always in the number of dice, the number of D, and so in this case it's 8D for a longsword. The damage attack type for a sword is slash. The number of attacks per round is 1. The speed, this is the modifier on your initiative. So if you're using something like a longsword, there's no modifier. If you're using a small, light, easily maneuverable weapon, then you can get a bonus on it. So for example, a dagger might have a +1. But if you're wielding a great axe that takes a lot of effort to sort of lift up and put behind you to swing, that will mean that your action will come slightly later in the round. So you'll have a -1 or 2 modifier to the speed. In this case, for a longsword, it's 0. The range is especially useful for long-range weapons like bows or thrown daggers or spears or that sort of thing. But it's also important for hand-to-hand or close-up combat. A longsword has a reach of about 1 meter, but if you're using a halberd, for example, that could have a reach of 2 or 3 meters. So reach and range are the same thing in this case. So for longsword, we just put 1 meter. In the case that it is a ranged weapon, you're actually shooting or throwing something, then the range is actually a series of categories. This is also a good time to point out that anything with a double line underneath is a tooltip. So if you hover over that, it will show more information. So when you're firing a bow at range, at 0 range to the range listed, say 30 meters, then there's no modifier. But at 30 meters to the next range category, which is double that, it's a -2 to hit. The next range category is double to 3 times the base range. So in this case, 60 to 90 meters, there's a -4 to hit. But at 3 times the base range, it's impossible to hit a target. So that's what the range works, how it works for ranged weapons. So you just put in the base range for the case of a short bow, it'd be say 30 meters. AP is armor piercing. Armor, the way it works in combat, just briefly, is that it doesn't affect whether you get hit or not, because armor doesn't stop someone from hitting you. It protects you when you are hit. So what an armor value does is you subtract the armor value from the damage done to you. So for example, you might have chainmail armor, which is, for example, plucking a figure out of my head because I don't have the charts with me, might be a value of 3. So if an opponent hits you, they did 6 damage, you're wearing chainmail armor, its defense against the type of weapon that they were using is 3, that means you only take a damage of 3. Armor piercing, however, is a weapon that's designed to overcome that benefit. If you have an armor piercing value of say 1, that means that your armor or your opponent's armor no longer has a benefit of 3 protection, it has a benefit of 2. So that means that your weapon is more effective against armor. Things like arrows, particularly from a longbow, they are very armor piercing. Spears and daggers, piercing weapons in particular are very good at armor piercing. Bludgeoning weapons are not. In the case of a longsword, there is no armor piercing benefit, so I'll just change that to 0. Ammunition, that's just somewhere that you can keep track of things. I'd love to be able to integrate it into the automatic rolling so that every time you click roll on a weapon with ammunition, it will subtract 1 from the total. I haven't worked out how to do that yet, so in the meantime, this is something you can just use to keep manually. In the case of a longsword, of course, there's no ammo, so we'll leave that 0. Now, before I can roll, to click on the roll button to work out whether you hit something or not, we need to fill out the skills, because the skills are drawn upon in order to fill in the details for that weapon. Now, skills are, well, basically you can do anything. If the skill is not listed here, and I've tried to list all skills, then you can request I add one to the character sheet. And unless I have an objection to, which I usually don't, I will add it to the sheet. There is a way with Roll20 to automatically create new slots for skills in a character sheet as you add them, but I couldn't get that working with the compatibility of the rolling system that I built into this. So perhaps at one point in the future I'll work that out, but for now I've got all skills listed. The way skills work is that, as I said, anyone can try any skill, but of course if you've had no training or experience, you're not going to do very well. So we've got the skill in the first column here, and then we have a column which shows what attribute that skill is based on. So a starting level of a skill is determined by the level of the base attribute divided by 2 rounded down. So acrobatics is based on reflexes. My character's reflexes skill is 6. That means a first attempt at a acrobatics roll will be a 3. Now you can go through your character sheet and you can update all of your skills with their default values. Then you go on to, when you're creating a character, to purchasing skill upgrades. And I'll come back to that shortly. Because I'm still talking about the weapons for the moment, let's just fill in the skill required for this weapon, which is the sword skill. So we scroll all the way down to make things a little bit easier to find. I've got weapon skills and languages skills taken out of the skill list and put as separate tables. So swords, their base is reflexes. In the case of this character, if they had no practice already with the sword, they would have a skill of 3. But I'm going to say that I'm going to spend some points and I'm going to increase the character's sword skills to 6. So now that that's put in there, I can come up to the long sword here and I can click roll. And on the right hand side in the chat, you will see the results come up for that. Now, this error message here, that appears when you're rolling without having previously selected a token. As I said, the character sheet is linked to a token. If you have the token currently active, it's focused, then any rolls that you make with that will automatically update the initiative tracker. That makes things so much faster, and it means that you can keep track of the order of turns without having to tell me to add it to the tracker list. But because I don't have a token on the table for this character at the moment, this error will come up. Clicking on the roll for the longsword will pop up a little dialog box that everyone will see, and it says the character name attacks with her longsword. That's where the gender drop-down list comes down. That will be her, his, or their, depending on the choice. In this case, the initiative roll was a critical failure, unfortunately, but that's because I hadn't actually put initiative in as a skill. So I'll go back and do that later, but for now I'll continue explaining this. The attack roll based on the sword skill was 4. That's not bad. If it hit, because under this point, under attack roll, it's dependent on what the opponent rolled in their defense. Assuming it hit though, then the location it hit was torso. That's determined randomly, but it's weighted, so the torso is more likely to come up because that's where you'll be aiming without having done a called shot. And this is the damage that's done of the type. So this little formula here, this little box, has actually worked out a lot of information for you. It's worked out your initiative, your attack roll, where it hit, what damage it did, what type of damage it did, and it's automatically put that into the initiative tracker if the token is selected. So it's very handy, and this will speed things up significantly from the way I used to do this with tabletop rolling. Just for the sake of interest, let's go back and put in a initiative, and let's say their initiative is 5. When I now go and roll longsword again, you'll see that come up. Again, I haven't selected a token. There's none on the table for this character at the moment. But now their initiative is 3. Their attack roll was 1. Unfortunately, not very good, but at least not a critical fail. It hit the left leg, if it had have hit, and it would have done 3 slash damage. And again, the damage type is what's checked against the armor type in that area. So you look at the left, or in this case, I will look at the left leg slash defense against your character's attack as a GM. But if I'm attacking you as a GM, as a monster, then I will tell you where it hit and what type of attack it was, so that you can then check that against your armor. So you can start through by putting through all your skill bases. So we've got Spirit of Force, so Animal Handling default is 2, Appraisal is mine, so that would be 3, Archaeology is mine, that's also 3, and so on and so forth. Any one of these skills can be rolled by you at any time at that base level. But we want to start your characters off as more than just their base. So I use a system where I have a points buy system. I give you points, and then you use those points to buy your skills. That's your character points. So each player will be starting off with 128 character points. That means that you'll be able to buy increases in certain skills. So this is the skill buy point cost chart. So if you want to increase a skill from level 2 to level 3, it'll cost you 2 points. If you want to go from 3 to 4, it'll cost you 4 points, and so on, with each level increase doubling the total. So it's, as you can see, very hard to go up very high as we get later on. If you wanted to go up from level 8 to 9 without having to roll a 9, then you'd need to spend 128 character points. Now, in the past, in my experience, I typically give out around about 15 character points per session. So that means that on most sessions, you'll be able to increase on average a level 5 to a level 6. It may seem a bit stingy, but you'll find that over the time of the course of the campaign, and given the fact that you are rolling your skills quite frequently, and that will increase the levels as well, it progresses at a reasonable pace. To start with, I'm going to start you off with 128 points, and you can buy whatever skills you want to increase by that amount up to a total. So if you wanted to increase, say, 3 skills from 4 to 5, you have to spend 8 times 3 to do that. Now, I may decide as we work together on this that the starting number of character points for you to buy your skills isn't enough or is too much. And as we work together on that, I'll discuss that with you and I may change it. But for now, I'll start with 128 points. Okay, so once you've filled in all the defaults for your skills and bought the additional skill upgrades that you want, Then we move on to, and don't forget, of course, the weapon skills and the language skills down there. We move on to inventory. So the inventory is a bit of a work in progress at the moment. I want to have it so that it will automatically tally and add up the total inventory weight. But for now, you just put it in manually. Let me just bring this up a little bit so I can scroll all the way to the bottom. Oh, okay, the bottom is not showing there. All right, well, I'll figure out what's going on there, but at the bottom we've got a total and we've got a encumbrance levels. So when you are working out how much you can carry, that's based on your body. And from memory, because it's not displaying, I believe it's your body times 5 in kilograms. That allows you to carry that much weight. So your body is 5, that means you can carry 25 kilograms without being encumbered. Now when you're encumbered, you can carry more, but it will have some negative effects. So if you're between 1 times and 2 times your encumbrance level, then you will have your movement speed reduced and you will have negative adjustments to any physical skills, so reflexes, dexterity, and so forth. I believe it's at -1. Again, I can't check because it's off the bottom of the screen, but you'll be able to see that on your character sheet. It's the same also if you're carrying more than double. So if you're carrying more than 50 kilograms, you'll have significant negative adjustments. And I believe at 3 times, then you can't carry anymore, you can't walk. So that is a very basic introduction to creating a character sheet. Hopefully that should get you started. The thing is designed ideally to promote role-playing. Because you can choose any skill, it's good if you have an idea of how you came to learn those skills. So if you already have some skill with the sword, then explain in your character's backstory where they came to know those skills. If you have a high level of, say, horse riding, then perhaps that meant that your character started work on a farm. The skills are things that you learn, the attributes are things that you're born with, so you don't need to come up with a role-playing explanation for your attributes, but skills definitely help in that way. So hopefully this has gotten you started and you can get to creating a character. No doubt you'll have some questions. If that's the case, just send me a message and I'll help you work that out, and we can get your characters into game as soon as possible.